Look closely, Father. Tell me who this man is. My daughter's voice, cold as steel, echoed through a room thick with dust and time. On the table, an old photograph trembled beneath her fingers. A harmless-looking photo. Christmas, 1975. Me, young, proud, holding my wife's hand. Margaret, and beside us, the man I never thought I'd see again. Thomas, my best friend, the one who vanished without a trace that year. Linda looked at me, her eyes wet but icy. I just want to know who he was to Mom. I froze. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I'd known it for 50 years and stayed silent. The house suddenly felt suffocating. The sweetest memories turned into evidence. Each frame, each smile, now standing against me. And in that instant, I knew. Within seconds, everything I'd ever called family would shatter. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about betrayal. It's the truth that will make you ask yourself, can love survive when the truth has been buried for half a century? Stay. The next part hurts more than betrayal itself. I still remember the day Margaret walked into my classroom. It was 1973. I was a young literature professor at Ridgeway University. She came to my lecture titled, "The Fragility of Trust." A cruel bit of irony, because that very topic would later define my life. Margaret was 23, wearing a pale blue dress, her hair tied low. Her smile made me believe the world was still pure. After class, she waited in the hallway and asked me just one question. "You said trust needs to be nurtured every day. So, if people stop nurturing it, does it die?" I smiled. If love still exists, it survives. And just like that, we fell in love. Simply, fiercely, purely. A year later, we were married. It was a small ceremony, only a few close friends, including Thomas, my college roommate. He handed me the rings, joking, "If you ever make her cry, I'll take her away." We laughed. No one knew that joke would one day cut like a blade. In the early years, we lived in a small wooden house in Green Hill. Margaret planted daisies by the porch, while I worked on my thesis about Shakespeare and taught night classes. We weren't rich, but happiness came easy. She used to say, "Samuel, I don't need fancy trips. I just need you home, reading poetry to me." On winter nights, as snow brushed the windows, I'd read her sonnet, 116. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds. Love, unchanging, even when the world changes. We lived by that belief for 10 years, until fate knocked on our door, disguised as a miracle, Linda. After 3 years of infertility, Margaret was pregnant. I cried when I first heard our baby's heartbeat. I thought, as long as I had them, life was complete. When Linda was born, Margaret looked at me through the glass and whispered, "Do you believe God answered us?" I said, "I believe in you more than in God." Linda grew up surrounded by laughter, by two people who thought they'd beaten destiny. If someone had told me that, 34 years later, that same little girl would confront me with a buried sin, I would have laughed. Because how could love ever turn into an accusation? But life always finds a way to test what we think will last forever. In 1975, Linda turned 1. That was when Thomas returned from working in Europe. I remember the evening he stopped by, brought a bottle of Bordeaux and a small gift for Linda, a teddy bear with LH stitched on its chest. "Little hope," he said, "so she'll always remember. The world still holds hope." Margaret smiled, softly, gently. But for a moment, something in that smile felt different. Not because she looked at Thomas too long, but because of the way he looked at her. Subtle, fleeting, yet enough to make my heart stutter. That night after he left, I asked, "Do you think he's changed?" Margaret said, "No, he's still Thomas. You're overthinking." I laughed it off, but a man's instinct, especially one who's loved deeply, is rarely wrong. Time passed. I got busier at the university. Margaret opened a small art class at home. Thomas would often drop by, helping her move canvases, fix frames, sometimes take Linda for walks when I taught late. Everything seemed normal, at least on the surface. Until one afternoon in March 1976, I came home earlier than usual. Linda was asleep. Margaret stood in the kitchen, her back to me. Beside her was Thomas. He said something that made her smile, the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. When I stepped in, they froze. Thomas quickly said goodbye and left. No one spoke. Only the ticking clock filled the silence, sharp, endless like a crack forming in the air. That night, Margaret turned her back to me in bed. I asked, "Is there something you want to tell me?" She whispered, "Just tired." After that, Thomas disappeared. No goodbye, no trace. The police said he might have left the country. I didn't investigate. I just wanted to forget. But Margaret didn't. She grew distant, quiet, often staring out the window, eyes glistening whenever Linda called her mom. When I asked, she said softly, "Some things, Samuel, are better left unknown." We kept living, as if nothing had happened. But every photograph, every Christmas, every memory carried that invisible gap. In 1980, Margaret fell ill. She grew weaker each day. On her final night, she held my hand and whispered, "If there's a next life, I hope I still choose you, even if I was wrong." I never asked what wrong meant. I didn't want to know. I just kissed her hand and promised I'd raise Linda the way she wished. And I did. Until today, when Linda forced me to look at that photo from 1975, Margaret smiling between Thomas and me, and I realized I never really left the winter of 1976. The letters weren't supposed to be found. I don't know when Linda began. Maybe that very night, after I went upstairs, or the next morning, when I left and the door closed behind me in silence. When I came back, the living room was chaos. Old photo boxes scattered everywhere. Christmas cards, Linda's school certificates, Margaret's handwritten letters, all torn open like an excavation with no mercy. Linda sat in the middle of that storm of memories, her eyes cold, judging me like a criminal. On the table lay our wedding album, its leather cover yellowed with age. But instead of familiar photos, she turned to a page that looked thicker than the rest and carefully slit the glued edge with a paper knife. A sealed envelope slipped out. I stopped breathing. Linda didn't look at me. She just opened it and pulled out 3 folded pages, old and ink-stained. At the top, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "To M, from T, Margaret, Thomas." Linda read aloud, her voice trembling. But her eyes no longer carried the innocence of the little girl who once held my hand on the way to school. "I can't stand watching you hold her every day. But I also can't destroy the family you've built. If fate allows, I just want one more winter near you." I heard every word, each one sliced through 50 years of carefully buried memory. "Are there more like these, Father?" Linda asked, still not looking up. I didn't answer. My eyes were fixed on another envelope. Ink had bled through it, forming the faint shape of a heart. She opened the second letter. Last night, Samuel taught late. Linda slept peacefully in my arms. Thomas, am I living a life that isn't mine? Linda folded the letter, her voice cracking. Mom loved him, even while she was lying in your arms. I sat down, trembling. You don't understand, Linda. They were friends. Very close. It could have been a mistake. She laughed, a hollow sound, sharp as glass. A mistake? These letters were hidden inside your wedding album. She kept them next to his pictures, not yours. I wanted to speak, to explain, but my throat closed up. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Margaret had written those letters, and I had once found them. That was back in 1976, just after Thomas disappeared. I found the envelope in her desk drawer, but I didn't have the courage to open it. I sealed it back up, buried it with our wedding album, as if I could bury the truth itself. But Linda, my daughter, Margaret's mirror, had unearthed it. Her voice softened to a whisper. She told the truth, didn't she? And you knew it, all along. I wanted to deny it, but her gaze cut through me, sharp, merciless, reaching into the deepest corner of my soul. And at that moment, I understood. The most terrifying thing wasn't Margaret's betrayal. It was Linda's eyes, realizing that the man who raised her for 34 years might also be a liar. I chose silence because silence was love. Linda didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at me, trying to decide if the man before her was her father or an accomplice in a decades-old sin. I sat down, hands trembling, memories clashing like shards of broken glass in my head. I took a deep breath and said, "You ask why I stayed silent? Because I didn't want to lose your mother, and I didn't want to lose you." She frowned, but I didn't stop. In 1976, 2 months after Thomas vanished, I received a letter, unsigned. It said, "Your best friend didn't go far. He stayed inside your house." And I knew, not because of that letter, but because of how Margaret looked away when I asked her. She didn't deny it. She just stayed silent. I wanted to rage, to accuse, to walk out. But when I saw her sitting beside your crib, the moonlight on her exhausted face, I couldn't. I just stood there and closed the door. For weeks we lived in that strange quiet. She still cooked breakfast, still kissed my cheek before bed. But in her smile, there was a sadness I could never reach. Sometimes at night, she cried in her sleep and whispered his name, and I pretended not to hear because I didn't want to know. Linda's voice broke the silence. "You stayed quiet to keep her, or to hide." "Both," I admitted. "But love isn't always right, Linda. Sometimes it just exists." I remembered one winter night when Margaret asked, "Are you afraid of the truth?" I said, "I'm only afraid of losing the one I love." She smiled sadly and whispered, "If one day the truth takes that love away, will you still love me?" I never answered, and she never asked again. Linda's hands shook as she held the letter. "You forgave her, but you said nothing. You let her drown in guilt. That's not love." "No," I whispered. "It was selfishness, disguised as love. I thought silence could save us, but it only rotted everything from within." Her voice cracked. "And what about me, Father? Your silence lied to me my whole life." I didn't answer, because that was the truth I'd feared most. Margaret took the secret with her to the grave, and I survived, condemned to remember. Linda put the letters back on the table, breathing hard. Maybe it's time the truth finally breathes, even if it's too late. She turned and walked away. I stayed there, surrounded by the fading light of dusk. I looked up at our wedding photo. Margaret's eyes still soft, still kind, and for the first time in 50 years, I whispered, "I forgave you, my love, but you'll never forgive me for calling our lies love. The blood never lies." I had no idea what Linda did after that night. She left in silence, no goodbye, no suitcase, just the letters and a small photo. 3 weeks later, she came back. No tears, no anger, just calm. "Dad," she said, "I need you to listen before you react." She placed a white envelope on the table, thick, official. I recognized the logo, Newport Genetics Laboratory. She pushed it toward me, her voice flat. I took a lock of Mom's hair from her keepsake box and one of Thomas's from his hospital records. I sent them in, along with yours and mine. And here's the result. My hand trembled. "Linda, what did you do?" "I just wanted to know who's been lying," she said quietly. I unfolded the paper. Just a few printed lines, but they thundered in my skull. Probability of paternity, 0.00% probability of biological relation between subject B, Linda H., and subject C, Samuel H. 0.0%. My heart shattered. Linda didn't move. Her lips trembled, but her eyes were steady. "So that's why you stayed silent. You knew, didn't you?" I wanted to shout no, to tell her I'd never seen those numbers, never wanted to. But the words died in my throat. Because deep down, I had always known. I knew the night Margaret whispered in her hospital bed, "If there's a next life, I hope I still choose you, even if I was wrong." I knew, and I chose to believe that love could outweigh biology. Linda's voice cracked. "You taught me honesty was the foundation of everything, but you lived a lie." I whispered, "No." I lived believing that love could redeem it, and I never once regretted loving you. She shook her head. "You loved me, but you stole from me the right to know who I am." That sentence crushed me. She continued, her voice trembling but sharp. "The results say it clearly. I'm Thomas's daughter, your best friend's child. So tell me, should I call him traitor or father?" I stood, frozen. There were no words left to hold anything together. She tore the paper in half and threw it on the table. Now I understand why Mom withered away. Not because of guilt, but because she lived between two men who loved her, and only one had the courage to face the truth. "Thomas wasn't brave," I whispered. "He ran away." Linda's voice dropped, cold as winter. "And you ran for a lifetime. And now, truth found you, through the very miracle you thought God gave you." She walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in silence. On the table, the test result lay open, that bold 0.0% burning into my soul. I picked it up with trembling hands, as if touching my own sin. Outside, rain began to fall. I stared at my reflection in the window, a man who had loved, forgiven, but never escaped. Truth doesn't heal. It burns. That night, the lights were on again. I thought Linda was gone for good, but her car sat in the driveway. Inside, she stood before our old wedding photo. The curtains swayed with the wind, the same way Margaret used to breathe when she wanted to cry unseen. "You knew from the start, didn't you?" Her voice echoed off the walls. "You knew she betrayed you. You knew I wasn't yours. So why the silence?" I swallowed hard. "Because I didn't want you to grow up feeling unwanted. Because I wanted to keep what little was left of this family." "Family?" Her eyes blazed. "The family you talk about is a cage built out of lies, You locked Mom in guilt. You locked me in illusion. And you locked yourself in pity. I stepped back. Her voice cut like glass. If you really loved her, why not let her be free? If you really loved me, why make me live half a life? I looked at her, my daughter, yet not mine, trembling with rage. But all I could see was Margaret's face in hers, the same eyes, the same voice, the same pain. I whispered, "Because, Linda, some truths. No one can survive. I just wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" She laughed, a broken, hollow sound. "Who were you protecting? Me, or the saint you wanted to see in the mirror?" I reached out to her, but she stepped back. "Don't touch me, Samuel, and don't call me your daughter again." For the first time, she said my name, bare, cold, final, and it shattered me. I sat down, gripping the edge of the table. "Linda, you can hate me, despise me, but don't say I never loved you. Every meal I cooked, every fever I stayed up through, every poem I read by your bed, that was real. No bloodline defines that." She trembled, but her tone stayed icy. "You loved me, but you turned me into your redemption. I don't want that kind of love." I shouted, "I didn't need the truth to love you, Linda." She froze. The world went still, except for the rain hammering the windows. I gasped, voice breaking. "I didn't need DNA or names or the past. You're my daughter because I chose to love you. But you—" My voice faded, eyes blurring. "You need the truth to hate me." Linda broke down, not with sorrow, but with the release of someone who finally had a reason to despise what she once loved. She turned away, whispering through tears, "Yes, I do. Because only by hating you can I stop loving a lie." The door slammed. Her footsteps faded into the rain. I sat there, head bowed, the DNA report bleeding ink in my hand. And I knew, in that moment, everything that once defined my life: marriage, honor, faith, fatherhood. All of it had turned to ash. In that house, only one thing remained: the old photo from Christmas 1975. 3 smiling faces frozen in time. Once a symbol of happiness. Now, evidence of the lie I once dared to call love. The day love turned into evidence. Margaret's memorial this year is at the Harlow house, her mother's side of the family. The living room shimmers with candlelight, the scent of chrysanthemums, a hush of whispers. Everyone thinks today is to honor a gentle, faithful woman and a model home. No one knows it's about to become a courtroom. I arrive early with Margaret's framed photo like every year. Linda comes too, black dress, hair pinned tight, her face so cold no one dares make small talk. Relatives greet me, a few elders rest a hand on my shoulder. "Samuel, dear, Margaret must be smiling from heaven, seeing how loyal you've remained." I smile back, but my chest feels heavy. When the incense has just been lit, Linda stands. She lifts a glass of wine and speaks, each word slicing the air. "Today, I want to say a few words about my mother, about love, about truth, and about the man I used to call my father." The room goes dead quiet. My heart starts pounding. A dull warning sweats across my brow. Linda goes on, eerily calm. "For 34 years, I believed my father was the best man I knew. Selfless, kind, my moral compass. Then I found out he was never my biological father." The last word explodes over the wake. Whispers erupt. A woman gasps. A cousin drops his bowl. She looks straight at me, no longer a daughter, but a prosecutor. "I have proof. DNA tests from Newport Lab. The results confirm it. Samuel Harlow has no biological relation to Linda Harlow. A few people cough. Others turn to stare, curious, pitying, even contemptuous. My cousin Martin blurts, "Linda, what are you saying? This is your mother's memorial, not the place to—" Linda cuts him off. "Uncle Martin, I'm saying this for her. If she'd been allowed to speak her truth back then, maybe she wouldn't have died drowning in guilt." I rise, trying to keep my voice steady. "Linda, that's enough." She pivots to me, candlelight flashing like knives in her eyes. "No, it isn't. For 50 years you've worn sainthood while the truth lay buried with her. I'm giving back the voice you stole from my mother." The air turns unbreathable. An aunt bursts into tears. "My God, Samuel, is it true?" I look around. Familiar faces turned jurors. No one speaks, but their eyes have already delivered a verdict. I want to shout that I betrayed no one, that I chose love over hatred. But they don't want nuance. They want a story for tomorrow, the respected professor who raised another man's child. Linda lifts her glass, voice firm. "I'm not here to insult anyone. I want my mother to truly rest in peace, and for you, Father, to finally live with the truth like a man." She drains the glass and sets it hard on the altar. The dry crack of crystal on wood sounds like the first fracture in the family mirror I've held together for half a century. The letter that should have stayed buried. After Linda's words, it's as if the room is vacuum sealed. All I can hear is rain hammering the tin roof and my own unruly heartbeat. No one speaks. Linda stands straight, eyes dry as stone. And me, adrift in a sea of relatives, suddenly a stranger in my own story. A young cousin whispers, "Uncle Samuel, is it true? Is Linda not your daughter?" The question spreads like poison. Stares of suspicion, pity, curiosity flood my way. I don't answer. I set Margaret's photo on the table and bow my head. "Please, eat," I say softly. "You don't have to believe me. I have nothing left to defend." I turn toward the door and walk, slowly. No one stops me. The whispers trail behind like gnats or ghosts. He must have known. Pitiful and shameful. And that man teaches ethics? The door closes. Cold rain slaps my face. I walk on, as if the wind is peeling my skin from memory. But the storm inside doesn't end there. As I disappear, Evelyn, Margaret's sister, rises. Her face is ashen, her hands shaking around a yellowed envelope. "Linda," she rasps. "I didn't mean to give you this, but maybe today is the day." Linda glances up, surprised. Evelyn steps forward and lays the envelope on the table. "In 1980, just before your mother passed, she sent me this. She told me, if the truth ever comes out, give it to Linda." Linda opens it. The handwriting wavers, ink blurred but legible. "If anyone reads this, please tell Samuel I'm sorry. I didn't have the courage to tell the truth. I sinned, but I never stopped loving him. If you can, tell Linda she's the most beautiful thing I left this world. Not because she belongs to anyone, but because she gives us a reason to forgive." Silence locks the room. Linda's voice tightens as she reads. A relative sighs. Maybe Margaret wasn't cruel. She was weak. Evelyn rests a hand on Linda's shoulder. "Child, some mistakes of our generation can't be mended by the next. Don't let hatred kill what was best in your mother." Linda goes still. Then she folds the letter, her voice hoarse. She apologized, but no one has apologized for him. Her eyes drift to the doorway, to where I vanished. My figure small, shivering in the rain. Tears mix with the downpour on her cheeks, and she can't tell whose they are. Her mother's, her father's, or her own. The night I stopped being the victim. It rains all night. I get home hollowed out. No rage, no shame. Like a man who's left a crash without yet knowing where he's bleeding. My suit jacket is soaked. I hang it on a chair and go to my desk. Margaret's photo sits there beside the letter Evelyn gave Linda, left behind when she fled the memorial. I sit and read it again. The ink is smudged, but the words feel like fire. Samuel, if you're reading this, I'm no longer here to tell you the truth. I loved Thomas. A wrong love, but not a betrayal. Because even with you, it was your arms I ran to whenever I was afraid, whenever I was alone. If you can, please understand. I never wanted to deceive you. I only wanted peace for us. I stop to breathe. Each line seems to drain the room of air. Below, smaller letters tremble. You once said love is forgiveness. But if forgiveness means silence, maybe we were both wrong. I lower the paper and look around the house. Yellow walls, an old bookcase. The armchair where I used to read poems to Margaret, still here. Only we are gone. For years I cast myself as the victim of deception, betrayed, wounded, forced into silence. But reading this again, I finally understand. No one fooled me. I chose the lie, because it hurt less than the truth. I built the cell, locked the door, and called myself a prisoner. Thunder rolls. I walk to the window. The street glows in puddled light. Rain erases edges as if the world is trying to wash our story clean. Then I see her across the road. Linda. She stands in the rain, clutching Margaret's frame, eyes fixed on the house. She doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stands between two worlds, truth on one side, memory on the other. I open the door to call her name, but the moment I step out, she turns and slips away, her small figure swallowed by the rain. I remain under the eaves, letting the cold water slap my face, a late punishment. On the altar, Margaret's candle still burns. The flame flickers across our wedding photo. 3 people, Margaret, me, and Linda, smiling. Now I see it clearly. It was never a record of happiness. It was a snapshot taken an instant before everything began to fall apart. And tonight, 50 years later, I'm no longer the betrayed. I'm just a man who loved and chose the wrong way to keep that love. 3 weeks after the memorial, an envelope from the Franklin County Court landed in my mailbox. On the front, notice of petition, motion to nullify will. Petitioner, Linda Harlow. My hands shook as I held it. Not because I feared losing money, but because one line said everything. Petitioner seeks annulment of will, citing fraudulent identity and non-biological relation. My daughter had officially turned me into the respondent. That morning, my lawyer, Mr. Clark, called. Samuel, I have to be blunt, she has a case. If Linda proves she isn't your biological child, she can move to reallocate the estate. The current will rely on consanguinity. I exhaled. Clark, I'm not here to fight. I want this to end quietly. A pause, then, so what do you intend to do? My voice surprised even me, calm, almost relieved. I'm giving it all away, to no one. The next day I went to the bank. The branch manager, an old friend, stared when I laid a stack of documents on his desk. I signed over everything, house, savings, stocks, the small piece of land from my parents, into a new foundation, the Margaret Foundation, legal representative, Samuel Harlow. Mission, support single mothers and abandoned children. When I finished the last signature, I said to the notary, "If anyone asks why, tell them I'm just giving back what the world once gave me, a chance to love, even if it was a flawed one." News travels fast. 3 days later, Linda showed up at my door, a copy of the transfers in her hand. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. "I'm protecting what your mother believed in," I said, meeting her eyes. She held up the paperwork, her hand trembling. "You dump everything into a faceless charity to dodge my suit? Is this how you prove you're noble?" "No," I answered slowly. "I just won't let you turn love into an inheritance line item." She gave a dry, bitter laugh. "So instead of apologizing, you canonize yourself. A charity? Using my mother's name? You think that launders the guilt?" "I'm not cleansing anything, Linda. I'm making sure your mother is remembered for kindness, not scandal. Take whatever you want, but I won't let you take the last good memory of her." She went silent, then spoke through clenched teeth. "You're hiding sin behind pity. You forget I'm an attorney. I don't want pity. I want justice." She left, the door slamming hard enough to knock the court notice off the table. I picked it up and stared at that word on the second line. Respondent. A father, now a defendant. Outside, the sunset bled red across the new sign hanging by my porch. The Margaret Foundation. Because forgiveness begins with truth. I read it and felt the weight of it. Forgiveness begins with truth. But my truth seemed to be killing everything I'd tried to forgive. The story spread faster than I imagined. Tuesday morning, I turned on the local news. Attorney Linda Harlow petitions to nullify the will of her father, distinguished Professor Samuel Harlow, citing invalid biological basis. The case has stirred debate in academia and the local community. Many once viewed him as a moral icon. The screen flashed our wedding photo, the same picture Linda once hurled to the floor. The anchor's voice droned on, a story of love, trust, and truth, where no one remains innocent. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, old friends, former students. Some asked gently, "Professor, is it true? Linda isn't your biological daughter?" Some sneered. So even the ethics professor had a blind spot. I shut the phone off. The quiet house felt like a cage echoing with the world's noise. Day 1 in court. Linda arrived with 2 colleagues, head high, face like stone. She didn't look at me. Outside, cameras flashed. "Professor Harlow, any comment?" someone shouted. "I'm here to listen, not to speak," I said. Inside, her counsel read the claim. The respondent, Mr. Samuel Harlow, drafted a will leaving his estate to his sole child, based on a presumed blood relationship. DNA results demonstrate no biological link. We therefore petition to void the will on the grounds of material misrepresentation. The court clerk scratched notes. The air grew heavy. My lawyer, Clark, said only, "My client does not deny the facts. He denies any wrongdoing." The hearing was brief, continuance set for next month. Outside, reporters swarmed. "Do you regret suing your father?" Someone yelled at Linda. She answered, "I'm not suing a father. I'm suing the man who lied to me my entire life." That night, I sat at Margaret's old desk to finalize the foundation's power of attorney paperwork. When I opened a drawer, a small USB stick fell out. A yellowed note was taped to it. "For Samuel, if truth ever hurts too much." I plugged it in. Her voice, hoarse, thin, unmistakable, filled the room. "Samuel, if you're hearing this, Linda is probably grown. I knew one day truth would find her, and I wouldn't be here to speak. I was wrong. I loved Thomas, but that love didn't erase the love I had for you. It only made me afraid of myself. I held the edge of the desk, knuckles white. You once said silence is the noblest form of love. You were wrong, Samuel. Silence only turns love into evidence against itself. If truth can kill a love, that love was never true enough. A soft cough, a long breath. If Linda asks, tell her I'm sorry, but don't let her hate me when she could understand me. I sat there a long time. Outside, it was still raining. For the first time in years, I felt Margaret speak, not to clear her name, but to release me. But would Linda ever hear this voice? Or only the gavel she believes is cleaner than a human heart? The second hearing took place in a room so cold, even a pen scratch sounded like a knife. More press this time. On the gallery bench, faces leaned forward, hungry for the next chapter in Franklin's favorite family case. I walked in without looking up. Across from me, Linda sat straight-backed, composed, but her hands on the table trembled. The judge began, "Mr. Harlow, does the defense have any additional material before we proceed?" I stood. "Your Honor, I have an audio message recorded by my late wife, Margaret Harlow. I believe it clarifies my motives and reflects her true intent." A wave of murmurs. Linda looked up, something flickering in her eyes. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Clark hit play. Margaret's voice filled the chamber, fragile, aging, but terrifyingly familiar. "Samuel, if you're hearing this, I'm already gone. I was wrong, not for betraying you, but for being too weak to bear my own loneliness. Thomas was a mistake. Linda was not. She is the love of both our lives, and I think you, of all people, know that." Linda went rigid. Her eyes darted, then locked on me. "No. No, this can't." The recording continued. "If truth ever hurts our daughter, don't go silent again. Tell her I loved her with everything I had, and tell her the real sin was our silence." The audio clicked off. No one moved. Even the judge was quiet. Only the soft buzz of the speakers and Linda's uneven breathing filled the room. A reporter in back whispered, "My God, she knew, and so did he." Linda's attorney sprang up. "Your Honor, this recording is unverified and undated. We object." The judge raised a hand. "Enough." He looked at Linda, then at me. "This is no longer merely a matter of law. This is a human question. Who exactly is paying the sentence here?" The room sank into stillness. Linda bowed her head. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter cry. Not angry tears, but the grief of someone finally seeing her mother as she truly was, beneath the dust of years. "Mama," she whispered. "You chose silence, and so did he, and that silence devoured us." I wanted to go to her. I didn't move. Between us lay a distance no blood could measure, only decades of unsaid words. After the hearing, the town split in two. Half condemned Linda, an ungrateful child suing the man who raised her. Half condemned me, a hypocrite hiding behind the language of love. The media gave it a name. The family that loved too quietly. No one won. Only one person had been right from the start. Margaret. Love never survives silence. I went home in the dark and played the message again. Margaret's voice drifted like wind through a window. "Please forgive her. For me." I closed my eyes. From now on, the fight between Linda and me would not be about money. It would be a test, to see whether love has enough strength left to save our souls. 3 days after the hearing, the first headline hit the front page of the Franklin Chronicle. Was Thomas Harlow murdered? the hidden past of Professor Samuel. They blew up the old photo, me, Margaret, and Thomas in 1975, with a caption, "The best friend who vanished, the husband who kept quiet." I sat at the kitchen table, the paper shaking in my hands. On TV, the anchor laid it on thick. Sources say police may reopen the 1976 disappearance of Mr. Thomas Harlow after reports that the last person to see him alive was Professor Samuel Harlow. The blood in my body seemed to turn to ice. This had leapt beyond Linda, beyond the will, beyond family tragedy. It was becoming a case. The calls wouldn't stop. Unknown numbers, reporters, old students. A woman from national television left me with this grenade. "Professor Harlow, we're producing a feature on the 1976 disappearance. Can you confirm you were the last person to see Thomas Harlow alive?" "No comment," I said, and hung up. But the past didn't hang up on me. The last night I saw Thomas, we fought. He came to the house drunk, saying he was leaving, saying Margaret didn't need me. I remember his fist slamming the table. I remember, in a rush of anger, pushing him toward the door. He went out into the rain and never came back. No body, no goodbye. And now the silence was being tried as a crime. That evening, I turned on the TV and saw Linda. She stood at the courthouse gate, flashbulbs popping like lightning. "Ms. Harlow," a reporter called, "there are rumors your mother and Thomas were involved. Do you think your father had anything to do with Thomas's disappearance?" Linda said nothing. One beat, two, three. Then softly, "I don't know. I only know that for 50 years, everyone in my family chose silence. And sometimes silence kills more people than a crime ever could." The quote poured gasoline on the fire. The media detonated. Social feeds swarmed. He definitely did something. People don't just vanish. That poor woman. Her father's a killer covering his tracks. A family built on lies and sin. I shut off the TV. The noise didn't stop. It had a way of filling the room, even with the power off. Millions of verdicts from people who didn't know me. That night I sat alone in my study. The house felt strange, slanted, paint peeling. Crooked frames. The wall clock frozen at 11:47, the minute I was told Thomas had disappeared. I thought, so that's human justice. Not in a courtroom, in a mouth. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You can't stay silent forever, Samuel. Thomas deserves a voice." My hand shook around the screen. Maybe someone was prying open the grave I'd tried to seal for half a century. Maybe the truth from 1976 wasn't dead at all. A week after the story exploded, there was a knock at midnight. A young reporter stood on the porch, press badge hanging from his neck. Ethan Miller, Franklin Daily Investigations. He wore the satisfied smile of a man holding a match near dry straw. "Professor Harlow, we found this in the attic of your old house." He held up a dust-choked Super 8 camera, the leather strap rotted. "The neighbor says it was your wife's. We restored the film inside." My blood chilled. "You watched it?" He nodded, eyes bright. "And it changes everything." 2 days later, the footage went live on Franklin Daily Online. Grainy, speckled, unforgiving. Margaret is filming, breath shaky. The porch outside drowns in rain. Her voice trembles behind the storm. "Samuel and Thomas are talking out there. I don't know if I should be filming this, but I'm scared." The lens drifts toward the window. Two silhouettes blur in the downpour. Thomas, tall, shoulders taut, barks. "You don't get it, Sam. She loves me." My voice, tight, breaking. "No, Thomas. She loves both of us, and because of that, she'll lose everything if you stay. Wind howls. Thomas steps in close, jabbing a finger at my face. If you really love her, let her choose. The frame jolts. Margaret screams, "Stop! The two of you are insane!" The image flickers. A body hits the wet ground, then black. The headlines roared, "The lost tape. Did Samuel push Thomas?" The internet boiled. 1,000 verdicts in an hour. I saw him step forward. There was a shove. Reopen the case. Enough evidence. Linda's the second victim, paying for the father's crime. Linda called me that night. Her voice splintered. "Dad, I don't know what to believe. I watched it 100 times. I want to believe you, but I saw your hand. Saw you move toward him." I swallowed. "Linda, you don't understand. He was drunk. He slipped. I didn't—" "Don't," she said. "No one out there wants the truth. They just want a culprit." She hung up. By morning, reporters had swarmed my lawn. "Professor Harlow, did you kill your friend and hide it for 50 years? Did Margaret film you pushing him? When will you confess?" I slammed the door, heart ricocheting. On TV, the anchor announced, "Police are considering reopening the 1976 case. The last person seen with Thomas, Professor Samuel, has declined to comment." Everything cracked. Old letters ransacked. Former students avoiding eye contact. The town pointing at a murderer. That night, I climbed to the attic. Moonlight sliced the dust. I found the original reel and, hands shaking, fed it through. There, on the tail end, another sliver of footage the paper hadn't shown. Margaret sets the camera down, breathless. Her voice quivers. "No. He slipped. Sam, stop. He's breathing. Call an ambulance." The image fades under her panicked cry. "Sam, now." I sank to the floor, tears burning. No one but me had heard the end. Thomas's death wasn't murder. It was an accident. A tragedy the media had trimmed into a sentence. Monday morning, I carried the original reel to Franklin PD. Outside, the press pack churned. Mics, lenses, shouted accusations. "Were you there the night he vanished? When will you confess? Did Margaret capture the shove?" I walked past them, silent. In my pocket, the reel felt heavy, not as film, but as the vessel of a life spent quiet. Inside, a veteran detective watched the footage from start to finish. When Margaret's voice cried, "He's still breathing! Call for help!" he nodded slowly. "Mr. Harlow, this reads like an accident. No intent. I'll file the report." "But the crowd outside? They won't stop that easily." "I know," I said. "Their justice is ratings." 3 days later, the networks aired the tape, but the end was gone. They froze the frame on Thomas falling and stamped it with a red caption. "The moment before he disappeared forever. No, he's breathing. No, call an ambulance. Just my face, shadowed hard, cut like a killer's mask." The firestorm doubled. National shows, ethics podcasts, YouTube thumbnails with knives in their fonts. The lying father, professor kills friend, raises the victim's child. Linda, the only survivor of a 50-year lie. The public split. One side wanted me in cuffs. The other turned on Linda. She's got a traitor's blood. If the mother lied, the daughter lies too. Threats filled Linda's inbox, emails, anonymous letters, messages dripping venom. "You're a product of sin. Stop preaching ethics fraud." She called close to midnight, exhausted. "Dad, I don't know what to do. Everyone hates me." I closed my eyes and whispered, "Welcome to my world." Silence on the line. Then she cried. Not the attorney, not the accuser, just a woman crushed between love and truth. I wish we'd never found that photograph. No, I said. Without it, we'd still be living a pretty lie. Truth doesn't save people, Linda. It just strips the soul bare. A week later, a national magazine ran our faces on the cover. The Harlows, a family devoured by truth. A small line beneath it read, "He lost his honor. She lost her name." Perhaps at last, both found the thing they were missing. The truth, unvarnished. I folded the magazine and set it on Margaret's altar. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Church bells drifted from somewhere far, like a funeral for everything we once called reputation. I looked up at the old photo. 3 faces, mine, Margaret's, Linda's, still smiling. But now I understood. No one in that picture was truly alive anymore. December. 50 years after the night Thomas disappeared, the case of Harlow vs. Harlow opens in Franklin Superior Court. This time, it isn't just a family civil dispute. Linda's new filing seeks 2 rulings: a legal determination that Thomas Harlow is her biological father, and the invalidation of Samuel Harlow's entire estate plan. The trial is broadcast nationwide. Outside the courthouse, hundreds gather with signs, "Truth over blood. Justice for Margaret. No more silence." The crowd moves like surf, and we, 2 people inside the story, are swept into a sea that seems to hunger for blood more than justice. Linda enters in a black suit, hair pinned high, eyes steady. I arrive in an old suit, thinner now, but composed. The media calls me the quiet man, the one who chose silence until silence failed him. Judge Patterson, a stern, middle-aged woman, opens. Today, we are not merely handling a property suit. We are confronting a question: can love replace truth? Camera shutters pop across the room. Linda rises, her voice clear. "I'm not here for money. I'm here for my mother's dignity. And my own." In 1976, when my mother died, everyone praised my father's devotion. Behind that devotion was a secret that forced 3 people to live a lie. I want one thing: acknowledgement of the truth. Thomas Harlow is my biological father. Murmurs ripple. Some nod. Others sigh. The judge turns to me. "Mr. Harlow, your statement?" I stand, leaning lightly on a cane. My voice is hoarse, but each word lands. I don't deny the DNA, I deny only this: that blood is the sole truth of a life. I loved Margaret with all my soul, and I raised Linda with that love. If that is a sin, I'll bear it for the rest of my life. A wave of whispers rolls through the gallery. Linda gives a brittle smile. "You call it love. It was possession. You held my mother with silence and me with a lie. Who did you truly love? Us, or the role you played?" I look at her. No anger left, only fatigue. Maybe you're right. But if a man performs a role his whole life just to keep a family, maybe that role becomes real. Order is called. Linda's attorney presents the evidence: DNA results, copies of Margaret's letters, and the edited video. Counsel reads, "This shows Mr. Harlow concealed his daughter's identity to preserve personal benefit and public reputation." I sit still, each sentence cutting across memory. Then it's my turn. I nod to Clark. He carries a sealed envelope to the bench, red wax intact, labeled TH, for Sam, if I disappear. The room erupts. The judge frowns. "What is this?" "The last letter from Thomas Harlow," I answer. "He wrote it before leaving Franklin in 1976. It arrived 2 months after he vanished by mail. I've never released it. Today he deserves to finish his part." Linda stares at me, stunned. She whispers, afraid of her own voice. His letter. I nod. From the man both of us carried in our hearts, but never truly understood. I hand it to the clerk. The judge skims, then nods slowly. Mr. Harlow, you may read it aloud. I break the seal. The ink is blurred, the paper yellowed, but the first line is sharp as a blade. To Samuel, my brother in love. The room goes still. Lights bear down. I breathe and begin to read. To Samuel, my brother in love. I don't know if you'll ever read this. If it reaches you, I have left Franklin, or this world. First, I'm sorry. Not only because I loved Margaret, your wife, but because I loved her with the darkest part of me. I came to her not out of pure love, but out of envy. Envy of the man I could never be. You. I pause. Below, Linda's hands grip the table, trembling. I envied how you made her smile, the way she looked at you when you said nothing at all. In that envy, I went to her, weak, drunk, and cowardly. She cried. I comforted her. One wrong doubled another. One night, only one, broke 3 lives. When Margaret told me she was pregnant, I didn't know who I was anymore. I wanted to run, but she said, "Let me make this right myself." Then I saw you in the rain that day. I came to confess and to beg forgiveness, but you struck me without using your fists. You struck me with silence. You said, "If you love her, disappear so she can have peace." I did. Not from fear, but because a real man isn't the one who wins a woman's heart, but the one who leaves when leaving is mercy. A small sob ripples through the gallery. Linda covers her mouth. I steady myself and continue. I left Franklin that night. Before I went, I mailed this to you, and a copy to my attorney, in case anything happened. I don't know whose child she is. Maybe mine. Maybe yours. It doesn't matter. You are the man Margaret trusted, and you are the man Linda needs to grow. If fate is fair, I hope Linda never carries my name. Let her keep yours, Harlow, for that is the name of love, not of sin. If one day the truth is exposed, do not be afraid. Truth does not destroy love. It purifies it. Thomas. The chamber seems to lose its air. Paper whispers against the mic. Someone draws a breath. Even Judge Patterson sets down her glasses and studies me. Linda rises, eyes reddened. She takes a step forward, voice shaking. "Dad, how long have you had that letter?" 50 years, I say softly. "And you never meant to tell me?" I nod, smiling sadly. "I thought silence would spare you. I forgot. You didn't need a savior. You needed someone truthful." Linda begins to cry. Not a wail, but the final release of a soul held down too long. The judge taps the gavel once. "Order. We'll recess for 10 minutes. She leaves the bench. The room stays hushed. No one speaks. No camera dares to click. Everyone knows they've just heard a confession that makes the law itself bow its head. I fold the letter, slide it back into the envelope, and look up at the screen where Thomas's last line still glows. Truth does not destroy love. It purifies it. I turn to Linda and whisper, "Maybe today is the day we're finally made clean, my girl." She looks at me, tears sparkling in the lights. No one knows if they mean forgiveness or despair. Only that, for the first time in half a century, there is nothing left to hide. 10 minutes later, Judge Patterson returns. The courtroom is packed. The air weighted as if all of Franklin is holding its breath for an answer to 50 years of silence. Outside, the crowd chants. Inside, the broadcast beams to millions. The judge speaks calmly. Having reviewed all evidence, including Mr. Thomas Harlow's letter, the court finds: first, there was no intentional fraud in Mr. Samuel Harlow's will. He acted from belief and love, not for personal gain. Second, based on Mr. Harlow's letter and Mrs. Margaret Harlow's statements, the court recognizes Linda Harlow as the lawful child of Mr. Samuel Harlow, both as a matter of law and of humanity. And finally, this court does not judge love. We honor it. Harlow versus Harlow, petition denied. The gavel falls, a small, dry sound that rings in my chest like a bell of release. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the swell, murmurs, shudders, the roar of opinion. Outside, cheers collide with jeers. Inside, it's only me and Linda, two bare souls staring at each other. She stands. No one stops her. No camera intrudes. She walks toward me, lights catching the last shine of tears on her face. "You won," she says quietly, without mockery. I shake my head. No one won, Linda. The court only admitted what was always true. Loving you was never wrong. She looks down at her hands. Her index finger trembles. I don't know what to do with what I've done. I wanted justice. All I feel is empty. I touch her shoulder, my voice rough. You did what I didn't have the courage to do for 50 years. You told the truth. She meets my eyes, blurred with water. The truth took everything. No, I say with a faint smile. It gave us the right to live honestly. We step out into hard sunlight. Reporters surge, microphones thrust forward, questions fly. Professor Harlow, how does it feel to prevail? Ms. Harlow, do you accept the ruling? Will you forgive each other? We don't answer. We stand side by side in the chaos. A strong gust scatters photocopied filings across the steps. In that instant, I feel Linda's hand tremble, then reach. Slow, hesitant, afraid of refusal. I take it. Small, cold, damp with sweat. No words, just a slight squeeze. Fragile, but real. Cameras swing toward us. Flashes explode. But none of them capture what truly happens. A father, after half a century, finally touching the child he loved through a lie, with the truth. Linda bows her head and whispers, only for me. Dad, I'm so tired. I know, I say, squeezing once more. Rest now, sweetheart. She releases my hand and walks straight through the press without looking back, her figure thinning into the crowd, slender, alone, somehow lighter than before. I remain on the courthouse steps, the sun bright in my eyes. In the clamor, I hear Margaret's voice, soft as a last breath of memory. If the day ever comes when the truth is spoken, you will be free. I smile. My palm is still warm from my daughter's hand, proof that love, even late, can outlast any verdict. 3 months after the verdict, Franklin slipped back into its old rhythm. Only Linda and I were still stuck inside the wreckage of a story the whole country had watched. My name, Samuel Harlow, vanished from Ridgeway University's list of distinguished faculty. They sent a polite letter thanking me for many contributions, with one small line. To protect the university's image, we must conclude your honorary appointment. I don't blame them. People who once shook my hand and called me a man of integrity now hurry past on the sidewalk. Someone whispers behind me, he didn't commit a crime, but he isn't innocent either. It's true in a way. I didn't kill anyone, but my silence buried many. Margaret, Thomas, Linda, and myself. For Linda, the public was crueler. She was dismissed from her firm. Headlines crowed, "The lawyer who sued her father, moral icon or opportunist?" Clipped videos of her breaking down in court turned her into a symbol of performative virtue. One afternoon, a package arrived, an old magazine. In the center spread Linda's photo. The caption read, "She won justice and lost herself." I called. No answer. Late that night, a single text. "I'm fine. I just don't want to be seen anymore." I knew she was lying. Linda is strong, but not steel. She's water, clear, but quick to freeze if left too long in the cold. One evening, after weeks of silence, she stood at my gate. Gray coat, hair loose and tangled, her face hollow. She said nothing, just looked around the old house that had once held the three of us, and stepped inside. Margaret's framed photo still sat on the table. Linda touched the glass and whispered, "I used to think she was the betrayer. Now I only see she was a victim too." "We all are," I said. "The difference is simple. Those who choose silence die slowly. Those who speak are cut down fast." She sat across from me, exhausted. "I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my name. Even the people who admired me are quiet now." "They're afraid," I said with a thin smile. "Truth makes people see themselves. Who hasn't lied to keep what they love?" She looked at me, eyes red. "So, you don't regret it?" "I do," I said softly. "But not for loving. I regret letting love be named a sin." The next day, I took her to the southern hill where Margaret is buried. On the stone, a single line. "She loved quietly." Linda knelt and set down white roses. She didn't cry. She only spoke softly, for the wind to hear. "I don't hate you anymore, Mom. I only wish you'd been allowed to tell the truth. Just a little sooner." I stood behind her and set a hand on her shoulder. No words needed. We both understood. Some sentences don't need a gavel to make us live like we're serving them. On the way home, Linda said she wanted to leave Franklin. "Here, everyone knows my story. They don't see me as a person anymore, just a scar." "Then go," I said. "But don't run. Go to begin again." She studied me. "Will you come?" I smiled. "No, I need to stay and clean up what's left of my life. You need to find a place where no one knows your father's sins." She nodded. Before she left, she hugged me for the first time in years. A short, trembling embrace, as if time might crumble in our hands. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not betraying me, even when the world said you did." "I only chose you," I said, "the way Margaret once chose me." Then she went. The road stretched long, evening light on her shoulders, her shadow drawn like a line between the past and a new beginning. That night the house felt empty enough to hear the clock sigh. I sat alone, watching rain veil the wooden sign by the porch. The Margaret Foundation, green with moss, the faded motto still legible, "Because forgiveness begins with truth." I said it aloud, a prayer for what remains of my life, and in that moment I knew I wasn't forgiven yet, but I had finally begun to earn it. February brought snow, and Franklin vanished under white. My old house was almost swallowed by fog and moss, only the Margaret Foundation sign listing in the wind. I lived simply and spent most days in the hospital. The slow illness in my lungs finally came to claim me, perhaps the body letting go after the heart had said all it needed to say. The early days, no one visited. The papers that once shouted my name had found new stories. Franklin gets a fresh scandal every month. To them, I remained the same. The quiet man. Then one morning, a nurse brought an envelope. Sender, Linda. Inside, one photo and a single page. In the photo, she stood before a small building with a sign, Margaret Legal Aid Center for Women and Children. On the page, a few careful lines. I used what was left in the foundation to open this place. Not to prove anything, just to help people who were forced into silence, like Mom. I miss you. I smiled, gentle and tired, and set the photo beside my bed where Margaret's picture used to be. Two women, one gone, one living, smiling at me from two frames. They taught me that love doesn't need to be believed. It only needs to be continued. Far away, Linda started over. She rented a small apartment in Portland and kept out of the news. No more pencil skirts or glass boardrooms. She wore sweaters and taught free legal classes to women escaping violence. One day a young woman asked, "You were a big-shot lawyer. Why choose this?" "Because fame makes you forget why you began," Linda said. "Helping reminds you who you were." Every night she wrote me letters she never sent. They all began the same. "Dear Dad." She folded them into a wooden box by her bed. She knew our time was running short. By April, the press shifted tone. A national magazine ran a feature. The Margaret Foundation, the redemption of a name. It told how volunteers revived the fund with a gift from an anonymous donor. No one knew it was Linda. Scholarships, support for widows, orphans. People began to say my name again, not with judgment, but with cautious respect. A journalist who'd once attacked me wrote an apology. "I forgot that truth and justice aren't always the same thing. Thank you for showing me that sometimes silence is its own form of love." I read it without anger or joy, just lighter, as if a last debt had blown away. One late afternoon, sunlight spilled through the hospital window, and Linda appeared in the doorway with a bundle of white tulips. I smiled and waved her in. "You went too far," I teased. "Portland's 1,000 miles from Franklin." "I came to say one thing," she said, voice quivering. "I'm not afraid anymore." "Of what?" I asked. "The truth, the crowd, myself." She sat and took my hand. "Every time I help someone stand up, I see Mom in them. She didn't die from betrayal. She died from loving too deeply and never being allowed to speak." I squeezed her fingers, a thin smile threading my lips. "You've spoken for her now. She can rest." That night, she left late. On the way home, she paused before the foundation's new office, the sign glowing softly. A group of kids taped up a fundraiser poster. The smallest asked, "Miss, who's the founder's name?" Linda smiled. "Someone who believed forgiveness begins with truth." She walked on, a hand over her heart. Somewhere, she knew her father was watching, and Margaret, on the far side of life, was smiling too. June. Summer came early to Franklin, and with it, my last days. The doctor spoke gently, as if words might break something fragile. "Your lungs are tired, Samuel. You can go home if you like." "Home is wherever there's light," I said. He nodded. I returned to the old house, the scene of happiness, then silence, now a quiet station for the end of the journey. Dust lay over the living room, but Margaret's and Linda's photos were still there, where I'd kept them for half a century. I cleaned each frame, then wrote a final note on old paper. Not a will, not a testament, just an apology. "Linda, if you're reading this, I've gone. Don't remember me as right or wrong. Remember, I was a man who tried to love, and sometimes loving the wrong way is still a kind of love. Stop fighting the past, my girl. The only victory you need is to live without fearing the truth. When you see the first bird cross the Franklin sky, think of me, in the wind, the light, and in the good you salvaged from me. Love, Samuel." I folded the letter and set it on Margaret's altar beside a sprig of dried lavender. Then I lay back in the chair by the window, facing the whispering maples. The wind sounded like someone calling my name, gentle, familiar, so soft I couldn't tell if it was Margaret or Linda or my own conscience saying goodbye. When the nurse found me in the morning, the window was open, the paper rustled in the breeze, and my face was calm, as if waking from a long sleep. The funeral was simple, just as I'd asked. No cameras, no headlines. Only Linda, a few people from the foundation, and the women the fund had helped. They came in silence, each carrying a sprig of lavender. The scent drifted through the cemetery, clean and true. Linda stood before my photo with the envelope I'd left. She read aloud, her voice steady at last. Heads bowed. Tears fell quietly. An older woman took Linda's hand. "He helped me leave my abusive husband last year. I don't know who he was in the papers. I only know he was the first person who listened without judgment." "That was him," Linda said, smiling through tears. "A man who listened with silence." She looked around at the field of purple flowers spread over the grave. No one planned it. No one ordered it. People just brought them. Perhaps Franklin had finally understood. The man they had condemned was simply someone who loved too much. When the service ended, Linda stayed behind. She sat by the grave and took from her bag the wooden box of letters she never sent. She opened it and let the pages go. They fluttered like white butterflies and disappeared into the Franklin sky. "Dad," she whispered, "I won't write anymore. For the first time, there's nothing left to say. I just want to live." She smiled, and in the soft light, one last tear fell. Not from pain, but from knowing that at last, truth, too, can be forgiven. As she left the cemetery, a flock of small birds crossed the sky and settled on the roof of the Margaret Foundation. Children laughed in the courtyard, and the wind stirred the wooden sign, "Because forgiveness begins with truth." Linda looked up and smiled. Against the bright sky, she saw two figures, Margaret and Samuel, hand in hand, dissolving into the evening light. No anger, no judgment, only love, washed clean by the truth. And that is how the story closes, not with death, but with continuance. Sometimes redemption isn't asking for forgiveness. It's living so love no longer has to hide in silence. 1 week after Samuel Harlow's funeral, an out-of-season rain fell over Franklin. No one mentioned him anymore. No bold headlines. No specials. Just a small item tucked into the bottom corner of page 3. Professor Samuel Harlow, central figure in a controversial case, dies at 83. No photo, no biography. A single chilly caption, as if the world could shrink him to 13 final words. Inside the Franklin Daily newsroom, Ethan Miller, the reporter who'd lit the fuse, stared at the paper on his desk. His eyes were bruised with sleep, his hand unsteady. On the monitor, the old reel looped again and again. Thomas falling, Margaret's scream cut off. He was the one who'd edited it that way. On the day Samuel died, a package arrived for Ethan with no return address. Inside, a thumb drive and a note. "You should hear the rest." He plugged it in. It was the original 1976 film, uncut. At the end, Margaret's voice came through, clear, panicked. "No, he slipped! Sam, stop! He's still breathing! Call an ambulance!" Ethan sat frozen, fingers digging into the mouse. A cold line of sweat traced his spine. He rewound, played it again and again, each time the same punch to the chest, the one sentence he'd cut, for clicks and a headline. Suddenly, the whole storm flooded back. The jeers, the hot takes, the Chakyan Harlow killer tag. Everything he'd helped ignite. Fuel for a fire that burned an innocent man. He opened his laptop and typed a single line into a blank document. I killed him without a knife. 3 days later, Ethan resigned. The newsroom didn't fight it. The editor-in-chief said only, "No one made you do it, Ethan. We printed what people wanted to see." The sentence chilled him, because it was true. No one made him. He chose. He drove to Franklin Cemetery on a morning thick with fog. Lavender lay fresh on Samuel's grave. Linda must have been there. Ethan set down a memory card and a folded note. "I'm sorry. I thought my job was telling the truth, but I only chose the part that sold. If there's a next life, don't keep silent. Speak, so people like me learn what justice really is." He knelt. No one else around, just wind and wet earth. He cried, for the first time in years, on the job. That same day, a video hit social media from anonymous source 1976, the uncut film. Within hours, it was everywhere. Viewers heard Margaret call Samuel in panic and saw Thomas slip. No shove, no murder. The tone shifted. So he didn't kill anyone. What have we done? He's dead, and only now we believe? A new hashtag rose. Forgive Harlow. Quieter this time. Soft posts, old photos, lines from Samuel's lectures that former students dug up. One wrote, "I was in his class. He said, 'Truth doesn't need to win, it only needs to exist.' Today I understand. We let it exist too late." The Franklin Daily bled readers by half. People boycotted the clickbait sites, demanded ethical accountability from reporters. Ethan was called to testify. He didn't argue. "I'm not here to defend myself," he told the panel. "I'm asking we stop killing people with words." Outside, a reporter asked, "Do you think Professor Harlow will forgive you?" Ethan smiled, eyes hollow but honest. "He doesn't need to. He forgave me before I knew I needed it." That afternoon, Linda received an email from a stranger. Subject: "I'm the one who helped kill your father." Attached was the original reel Ethan had released. At the end, one line: "Please don't forgive me. Just keep doing what he started." Linda read it in silence. Then she replied with a single sentence: "I don't need to know who you are. I only need to know the truth finally lives. And that's enough." That night, Franklin was still. The next day's papers didn't run scandals. They ran an old photo of Samuel at his final lecture. He stood at the lectern, book raised. "We don't have to choose between love and truth. If we love but fear the truth, we're only loving our own lie." Now those words returned, like prophecy. The man was gone, but the line lived on inside those who had once killed him with theirs. 3 months after the full reel went public, Franklin changed in quiet ways. People began leaving lavender at the gate of the Margaret Foundation. No campaign, no organizer, just bouquets appearing each morning, an unspoken apology from a city. Ethan, after too many sleepless nights, decided to leave Franklin. But first, he wrote to Linda. No flourishes, no excuses. A confession. "Linda, I'm the one who cut the film. I made a nation believe your father was a killer. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only want to see you once, to say exactly what I did." A week later, Linda agreed. That afternoon, the sky over Franklin was impossibly clear. They met in the garden behind the Margaret Foundation, where kids chased each other around a small fountain. Linda wore a white dress, hair tied low, her face calm, her eyes fathomless. Ethan came with a small bundle of lavender. Thank you for seeing me, he said, voice low. I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, Linda said. He inhaled. I edited that footage. I knew the ending cleared your father. I cut it. My editor wanted a more dramatic finish. When he died, I told myself it was karma. Then I listened to Margaret's voice and realized the greatest sin wasn't lying. It was turning the truth into a product. He bowed his head. I didn't come to be forgiven. I came to leave these flowers for him. I owe him thank you for enduring us. Linda was quiet for a long time. She walked to a new memorial stone in the garden, raised for Samuel Harlow. It read, "He loved quietly, but his truth still speaks." She laid her hand on the stone, then turned back. "You're not the only one who killed him," she said. So did I. I swung the sword of justice at the only person who ever loved me without conditions. Ethan's eyes reddened. "Do you hate me?" "No," Linda said gently. "Hate only prolongs silence. I want my father to be heard, even late." From that meeting, an idea took shape. They would hold a public remembrance, not for a victim of the media, but for the man who taught a town how to face the truth. Linda invited the old university, reporters, even those who had condemned him. Ethan called the networks, not for a headline, but for a lesson streamed live. The ceremony took place at the Franklin Square at the end of September. Soft sun, flags at half-staff, a slow, steady crowd. On stage, one microphone and a screen. They played the real film, complete, uncut for the first time. When Margaret's voice cried, "He's still breathing! Call an ambulance!" No one moved. The sound tolled across the square like a bell laying down the city's burden. Linda stepped to the microphone. Her voice was warm and sure, the voice of someone who'd already walked through every loss. "My father doesn't need vindication. He needs us to understand that truth never dies. People just stop listening. I'm not speaking only for him today. I'm speaking for anyone who's kept quiet, been misread, or lived with the fear that telling the truth will make them unlovable." My father said, "Forgiveness begins when we dare to speak the truth." I think at last, Franklin has done that. In the crowd, hundreds wept. Ethan stood in the front row, gripping his notebook, lips moving without sound. His eyes met Linda's, not as offender and victim, but as two people who had once helped kill a truth and were now helping it breathe. Night fell, and the square filled with candlelight. On the roof of the Margaret Foundation, small bulbs lit up one word: truth. A little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mom, who was Mr. Harlow?" "A man who taught me that telling the truth isn't scary," her mother said, "if you love with a clean heart." A breeze passed, making the sea of flames shiver. On the big screen, Samuel's final line appeared. "Love doesn't need to win. It only needs to be true." Linda stood beside Ethan, watching the candles flicker. "At last," she whispered, "he gets to hear people listen to him." Ethan shook his head softly. "No, at last we get to hear him." They looked up at the Franklin sky, where the glow from the square brushed the low clouds. Like a voice drifting on the wind, Samuel's voice saying, "Forgiveness begins with truth." And for the first time in half a century, Franklin slept, not in silence, but in peace. A year after my father died, I set out across America. Not to run from Franklin, but to look for the small pieces of him, scattered among the people the Margaret Foundation once helped. I traveled light. A backpack, a few notebooks, and my parents' photo. It's worn now, the edges soft. It doesn't hurt anymore. I just see two flawed people who loved and who taught me this. Truth can wound, but it's the lie that kills love. My first stop was Green Ridge, Missouri, where the foundation helped an elderly widow keep her house from the bank. The place was tiny, weathered wood, windows laced with vines. I knocked. She opened the door, silver hair, bent back, bright eyes. "Oh my, Linda, I knew you'd come." "You recognize me?" "How could I forget? You and your father saved me." I still remember him sitting right there drinking tea, telling me, "Forgiveness keeps your heart from turning to stone." She led me in. On the wall hung a photo from that day. Her, my father, and me, all smiling. Beneath it, a hand-painted plaque. "For Margaret." "He told me," she said, pouring tea, "that if there's still room in your heart for anyone, don't lock the door. So I never have. You came today because he sent you." Sunlight crossed the floor. Maybe she was right. The man who kept silent for half his life was speaking to me now, through those he quietly lifted. From Green Ridge, I drove to Hollow Creek, Illinois, to meet Mason, a young man the foundation helped re-enroll in school after prison. He coaches basketball for orphans now. He spotted me, ran over, and hugged me hard. "Miss Linda, I tell the kids about Mr. Samuel. They call him Coach Harlow of the Heart." I laughed, and it caught in my throat. "In lockup," he said, "I thought my life was done. Your foundation gave me a second shot, and your father sent a note with one line. You don't have to be perfect to begin again, just honest." That saved me. That night I stayed in Hollow Creek. When the town went quiet, I opened my notebook and wrote the first line of the journey. "I'm starting to understand, Dad. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is being able to tell the whole story and no longer wanting revenge." A thin breeze slipped through the window, carrying the soft scent of lavender. Somewhere I knew he was listening. I headed south, past Kansas goldfields and one-street towns with a single church. Everywhere I stopped, someone said my father's name, not as an accused man, but as the one who truly listened. In Cedar Plains, a young woman stepped from a bakery holding a faded photo. "He used to sit here," she said, "eating my mom's first apple pie after my dad died. He told her, 'Pain isn't for hiding, it's for sharing, because when others understand it, it hurts less.' Mom said he made her feel seen." Stories like that kept finding me, as if the whole country was keeping my father's memory for me. All I had to do was pass through, listen, and gather the pieces, like rescuing drops of light from ash. Late in the fall, a letter arrived from Franklin Correctional, the prison where Mason once stayed. The warden Harland wrote, "We have something that belonged to Mr. Samuel. He sent it here years ago, but it was never opened." The prison sat in misty hills, oddly peaceful. "He came 5 years back," Harlan said as we walked the cold corridor. "Not to teach, to listen. He sat with inmates and heard what no one else would. He told me, 'Forgiveness is a language only the fallen can fully understand.' In a small meeting room, he set a sealed wooden box on the table. He said to give this to you when the world stopped judging, and when you were ready to hear him with your heart, not your arguments." My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside lay a silver pocket watch, engraved on the back. "For when you forgive, time begins again." I couldn't hold back the tears. The watch still ticked, slow, steady, as if a little of him was breathing on. "He told me," Harlan said, squeezing my shoulder, "if you came back for it, he could finally rest." "He was right," I whispered. And I've finally learned to forgive. Not him, but myself. On my way out, I paused by the gate. A few inmates were tending a patch of lavender. The youngest called, "You're Mr. Harlow's daughter, right? He said if we keep planting long enough, the scent will drift even to places where folks don't want to smell it." I laughed, crying. They didn't know. The lavender had already arrived, and it carried a soul that had been forgiven. I returned to Franklin on a clear, late winter afternoon. Snowmelt in the air, a trace of lavender by the foundation's gate. The new sign on the steps gleamed silver with my father's line, "Because forgiveness begins with truth." I sat on the old stone and opened the pocket watch. The hands moved. Time, once my enemy, had become a friend. Through the window, I watched children laughing in a volunteer class. A curly-haired girl ran over. "Miss Linda, who was Mr. Harlow?" "He's the one who taught me some apologies don't need words," I said. "You answer them by living better." She nodded and skipped away, her laughter stitching itself into the wind. That night I wrote the final pages of my travel journal. Not confession, not regret, but thanks. "Dad, I understand now. Truth didn't destroy our family. It showed us who family really is. I thought I'd lost everything, but I've only just begun. Family isn't blood. It's respect and love." I closed the notebook and looked up at the Franklin sky. The stars burned bright, like souls smiling from the far side. I heard my father in the wind, low, warm, and steady. The way he spoke to me at the courthouse. "Loving you was never wrong. And I love you," I whispered. This time, with the truth. A year later, the Margaret Foundation had become a national emblem of humane justice. People told my father's story as proof that truth and mercy can live together, and that sometimes forgiveness is how we find ourselves again after losing faith in justice. At the memorial, hundreds of candles trembled in the breeze, their light flickering across a plaque that read, "Harlow Family Wing." In that moment, I understood. My father did not die in silence. He lives in every heartbeat that has learned to love honestly, speak honestly, and forgive honestly. If you've carried loss, been misunderstood, or suffered for telling the truth, remember this: truth won't leave you alone forever. It will lead you to the ones who know how to love you right. And when that happens, you'll know what I know now. That family isn't blood. It's respect and love. If Linda's story touched you, share it or follow along for the journeys to come. Each truth told not to condemn, but to forgive. Because the next story might be yours.